Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus in the small town of Clearwater, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as she walked toward the police station. At 28, she looked younger than her years, with shoulder-length brown hair and an unassuming presence that made most people overlook her completely. The Clearwater Police Department occupied a modest brick building that had seen better days. Paint peeled from the window frames, and the parking lot was filled with older patrol cars that showed their age. Sarah paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath before pushing through the glass doors. The reception area buzzed with activity despite the early hour. Officers moved back and forth, some heading out for patrol, while others returned for night shifts. Behind the front desk sat a heavy-set woman with graying hair who looked up as Sarah approached. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone suggesting she dealt with countless walk-ins every day. "I'm Sarah Martinez. I'm supposed to start today as the new officer," Sarah said, producing her paperwork from a folder she carried. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly as she looked Sarah up and down. "You're the new officer? Huh. Well, let me call Chief Thompson." She picked up the phone and spoke in low tones before hanging up. "He'll be right out." While waiting, Sarah observed the station's layout. The main area held several desks where officers completed paperwork. A hallway led to what appeared to be interview rooms and offices. The walls displayed commendations, safety notices, and a large map of the county marked with colored pins. Chief Thompson emerged from his office, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a bearing that spoke of decades in law enforcement. His uniform was crisp and his badge polished, but his expression showed skepticism as he approached Sarah. "Ms. Martinez? I'm Chief Thompson. Welcome to Clearwater PD." His handshake was firm but brief. "I have to say, you're not what I expected when I reviewed your application." "What were you expecting, Chief?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Someone with more presence, I suppose. This isn't a big city where you can blend into the crowd. Here, officers need to command respect just by walking into a room." He studied her carefully. "Your resume shows you worked private security before this. That's quite different from police work." Sarah nodded. "I understand the differences, sir. I'm ready to learn and contribute to the department." Chief Thompson gestured for her to follow him. "Let me introduce you to the team. Fair warning, though. Some of the guys might take time to warm up to you. They're used to working with people who've been here for years." They entered the main office area, where several officers worked at their desks. The chief cleared his throat to get their attention. "Everyone, this is Officer Martinez, our new addition to the force." The response was lukewarm at best. A few officers glanced up and offered polite nods before returning to their work. Others continued what they were doing without acknowledgement. Sarah noticed the lack of enthusiasm, but kept her expression neutral. "Martinez, meet Officer Jake Reynolds," Chief Thompson said, indicating a burly man in his 30s with close-cropped hair and muscular arms that strained against his uniform sleeves. "He'll be your training officer for the first few weeks." Reynolds looked up from his computer with obvious reluctance. "Great, another rookie to babysit," he muttered, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Hope you can keep up, because I don't slow down for anyone." "I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you, Officer Reynolds," Sarah replied evenly. Reynolds snorted. "We'll see how appreciative you are after your first real call. This isn't mall security where you tell teenagers to move along. Real police work requires backbone." Officer Tom Bradley, a younger man with sandy hair, chuckled from a nearby desk. "Jake's right. Last new officer we had couldn't handle the pressure. Quit after 2 weeks when he had to deal with his first domestic violence call." "That's enough," Chief Thompson said, though without much conviction. "Martinez, Reynolds will get you set up with equipment and show you the basics. Try not to get in anyone's way while you're learning the ropes." The chief returned to his office, leaving Sarah alone with the other officers. Reynolds stood and walked to a supply closet, returning with a box of equipment. He dropped on an empty desk with more force than necessary. "Your duty belt, radio, pepper spray, and other gear," Reynolds said. "I assume you know how to use these things, or did they not cover that in security guard school?" Sarah examined each item carefully, checking the radio's frequency settings and testing the pepper spray's safety mechanism. Her movements were efficient and practiced, though she tried not to make it obvious. Everything looked standard. Same models I'm familiar with. Familiar with? From where? Officer Michelle Carter asked from across the room. She was the only other woman on the force, with short blonde hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her tone wasn't hostile, but it carried doubt. Previous security work involved similar equipment, Sarah answered without elaborating. Reynolds handed her a stack of paperwork. These are the forms you'll need to know. Incident reports, arrest forms, evidence tags. Think you can handle filling out forms without screwing them up? I'll do my best, Sarah said, beginning to review the documents. Your best might not be good enough, said Officer Dave Wilson, an older man with a permanent scowl. We depend on each other out there. One person who can't pull their weight puts everyone at risk. Sarah looked up from the paperwork. I understand the importance of teamwork. I won't let anyone down. Wilson laughed harshly. That's what they all say. But when things get real, when you're facing down some drunk with a knife or chasing a suspect through dark alleys, pretty words don't mean much. Dave's got a point, Bradley added. This job isn't for everyone. It takes a certain kind of person to handle the stress and danger. No shame in admitting if you're in over your head. Sarah continued reviewing the forms, making mental notes of procedures and requirements. The paperwork was straightforward, similar to systems she'd used before in different contexts. She said nothing about her observations, simply nodded and continued reading. Reynolds glanced at his watch. Time for the grand tour. Try to keep up and don't ask stupid questions. He led her through the station, pointing out various areas with minimal explanation. The interview rooms were small and sparse, designed to be uncomfortable for suspects. The evidence room required special access codes that Reynolds didn't share. The holding cells were empty, but showed signs of regular use. This is where we keep the troublemakers until they can be transported to county lockup, Reynolds explained. Think you can handle being locked in a room with someone who wants to hurt you? If necessary, Sarah replied. If necessary? Reynolds stopped walking and turned to face her. That's not confidence. That's uncertainty. In this job, hesitation gets people killed. They continued the tour, with Reynolds making pointed comments about the physical and mental demands of police work. He described high-speed chases, violent arrests, and dangerous situations as if testing Sarah's resolve. She listened without visible reaction, occasionally asking practical questions about procedures. The patrol cars were older models with high mileage, but they appeared well-maintained. Reynolds showed her the computer system, radio controls, and emergency equipment. These aren't toys, he said. One mistake with the radio, and backup might not find you. Think you can remember all these codes and procedures when adrenaline is pumping? I'll practice until it becomes second nature, Sarah answered. Practice? Officer Carter had joined them in the garage. This isn't a video game where you get multiple lives. Real situations don't give you time to think about what button to push. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. You're right about the importance of muscle memory. Proper training builds automatic responses. Training? Reynolds laughed. Lady, I've been doing this for 8 years. I've seen things that would make you quit on the spot. Your security guard training didn't prepare you for the real world. They returned to the main office where Chief Thompson was reviewing reports. He looked up as they approached. How's the orientation going? She seems to understand the basics, Reynolds said with obvious reluctance. We'll see how she handles actual police work. Good. Martinez, you'll ride with Reynolds for the next few weeks. Learn everything you can, and don't be afraid to ask questions. The chief paused. But remember, this is a small department. We can't afford dead weight. Everyone needs to contribute from day one. Sarah spent the rest of the morning completing paperwork and familiarizing herself with department policies. The other officers went about their duties with minimal interaction, occasionally making comments clearly intended for her to hear. Hope she doesn't freeze up during her first arrest, Wilson said to Bradley. Last thing we need is someone who can't handle confrontation. Maybe she'll surprise us, Bradley replied, though his tone suggested he doubted it. During lunch break, Sarah ate alone in the break room while the other officers gathered at a nearby table. Their conversation was loud enough for her to hear every word. "I give her a month before she quits," Reynolds predicted. "These small-town wannabe cops never last when they realize what the job really involves." "Could be less than that," Carter added. "First time she has to deal with a violent drunk or domestic dispute, she'll probably call for backup and hide behind a car." Sarah continued eating her sandwich, giving no indication she was listening. Her expression remained calm and neutral, though she mentally noted each officer's attitude and behavior patterns. After lunch, Reynolds announced it was time for their first patrol. "Stay quiet, observe, and try not to embarrass yourself," he instructed as they walked to their assigned car. The patrol car's interior was worn but functional. Sarah adjusted the passenger seat and familiarized herself with the radio and computer while Reynolds performed his pre-shift vehicle inspection. His movements were routine but thorough, checking lights, sirens, and equipment. "Pay attention to how this is done," Reynolds said as he tested the radio. "Vehicle inspection isn't optional. One day you might depend on this equipment to save your life." Their first call came within an hour, a minor traffic accident with no injuries. Reynolds responded with lights and sirens, though the urgency seemed unnecessary given the nature of the call. Sarah observed his driving technique and radio communications without comment. At the accident scene, two drivers stood beside their vehicles arguing about fault. Both cars showed minor damage, and no one appeared injured. Reynolds approached with authority, his presence immediately commanding attention. "All right, what happened here?" Reynolds asked, pulling out his notebook. The drivers began talking simultaneously, each blaming the other for the collision. Reynolds raised his hand for silence and interviewed each person separately. Sarah watched his technique, noting how he controlled the situation and gathered information efficiently. While Reynolds completed the accident report, Sarah examined the scene. The skid marks and vehicle positions told a clear story about what had occurred. She made mental notes, but said nothing, allowing Reynolds to handle the situation. "See how it's done?" Reynolds asked as they returned to the patrol car. "Takes experience to sort through conflicting stories and determine what really happened." "Your interview technique was effective," Sarah observed. "You kept control while letting each person tell their version." Reynolds seemed slightly surprised by her analytical comment. "Most rookies just stand there with their mouths open." "At least you were paying attention." The afternoon brought several more calls. A shoplifting complaint at the local grocery store, a noise complaint about a neighbor's dog, and a welfare check on an elderly resident. Reynolds handled each situation competently, though he continued making subtle digs about Sarah's inexperience. During the welfare check, they found an elderly woman who had fallen and couldn't get up. She wasn't seriously injured, but needed assistance. Reynolds called for an ambulance, while Sarah helped make the woman comfortable. "Thank you, dear," the woman said to Sarah as paramedics arrived. "You have such gentle hands. Are you a nurse?" "No, ma'am. I'm a police officer," Sarah replied softly. The woman looked surprised. "Really? You seem so kind and caring. Not like most police officers I've met." Reynolds overheard the comment and smirked. "Kindness is fine, but this job requires toughness. We'll see how long the gentle approach lasts." As their shift ended, Reynolds completed his daily reports while Sarah organized the paperwork they'd accumulated. Her forms were neat and thorough, with detailed observations about each incident. "Not bad for a first day," Reynolds admitted grudgingly. "You didn't get in the way or ask stupid questions. But today was easy. Wait until we deal with real criminals." Sarah nodded acknowledgement, but said nothing. As she prepared to leave, Chief Thompson approached her desk. "How was your first day, Martinez?" "Educational, Chief." Officer Reynolds is an experienced instructor. Thompson studied her expression. "You seem to be taking things well." "Some people get overwhelmed by the reality of police work on their first day." "I understand there's a learning curve," Sarah replied. "I'm committed to becoming an effective member of the team." "We'll see," Thompson said. "Reynolds will give me a report on your progress." "Don't disappoint me." As Sarah left the station, she could hear the other officers discussing her performance in the break room. Their opinions were mixed, but generally skeptical about her long-term prospects with the department. Walking to her small apartment a few blocks away, Sarah reflected on her first day. The challenges were exactly what she'd expected: skeptical colleagues, testing situations, and constant evaluation of her capabilities. She'd faced far worse in other circumstances, though her new co-workers couldn't know that. Her apartment was spartanly furnished with basic necessities. Sarah had learned long ago to travel light and avoid accumulating possessions that might tie her to one place. She prepared a simple dinner while reviewing the day's events and planning for tomorrow. The Clearwater Police Department was typical of small-town law enforcement: understaffed, overworked, and resistant to change. The officers were competent, but set in their ways, suspicious of outsiders who might disrupt their established routines. Earning their respect would require time and careful demonstration of her abilities. Sarah had chosen this assignment specifically because of its challenges. After years of high-stakes operations in environments where failure meant death, small-town police work seemed almost peaceful. But she knew better than to underestimate any situation or become complacent about potential dangers. As she prepared for bed, Sarah's mind was already working through scenarios she might face in coming days. Traffic stops that could turn violent, domestic disputes with armed suspects, pursuits through unfamiliar streets. Each possibility required preparation and mental rehearsal. Her training had taught her that survival depended on constant vigilance and preparation for any contingency. Even in Clearwater's seemingly quiet environment, danger could emerge without warning. She would be ready. The next morning would bring new challenges and continued skepticism from her colleagues. Sarah was prepared for both. She had work to do and a reputation to build, one call at a time. Sarah's second day began with the same lukewarm reception from her colleagues. Officer Reynolds barely acknowledged her arrival, gesturing toward the patrol car without his usual morning briefing. The message was clear. She was expected to keep up without constant instruction. "Today we're covering the East District," Reynolds announced as they began their patrol. "More rural area, lots of back roads where trouble can hide. Drug labs, illegal weapons, people who don't like cops poking around their business." The eastern part of Clearwater County was indeed different for the town center. Houses sat farther apart, connected by winding roads that disappeared into dense woods. Many properties showed signs of neglect, with rusted vehicles and makeshift structures scattered across overgrown yards. Their first call came from dispatch, a domestic disturbance on Maple Ridge Road. Reynolds' demeanor immediately shifted to high alert as he activated the emergency lights and increased speed. "Domestics are the most dangerous calls we handle," he explained while navigating the narrow roads. "Emotions running high, alcohol usually involved, and you never know who might have weapons. This is where rookies either prove themselves or wash out." They arrived at a rundown trailer surrounded by several old cars and motorcycles. Loud arguing could be heard from inside, with occasional sounds of breaking glass. Reynolds parked strategically to provide cover while maintaining a clear escape route. "Stay behind me and keep your mouth shut unless I tell you otherwise," Reynolds instructed as they approached the trailer. "Watch my back and be ready for anything." Before they could knock, the trailer door burst open and a large man stumbled onto the small porch. He was obviously intoxicated, wearing torn jeans and a stained t-shirt. His face showed fresh scratches, and his knuckles were bleeding. "Who called the cops?" the man shouted, swaying as he tried to focus on the officers. "Ain't nobody's business what happens in my own house." "Sir, we received a report of a disturbance," Reynolds said firmly. "We need to make sure everyone's okay." "Where's your wife?" "She's fine. Just having a little disagreement, that's all. You can leave now." The man's words were slurred, and his aggressive posture suggested the situation could escalate quickly. A woman's voice came from inside the trailer, high-pitched with fear. "Help me. Please help me. You got a knife." The man spun toward the door, his face contorting with rage. "Shut up in there. I told you to keep quiet." Reynolds moved closer, one hand positioned near his weapon. "Sir, I need you to step away from the door and put your hands where I can see them. You got no right to be here," the man snarled. "This is private property." From inside the trailer came the sound of furniture crashing, followed by a woman screaming. The man turned toward the noise, momentarily distracted. Sarah noticed his right hand moving toward his back pocket. "Reynolds," she said quietly, "back pocket." Reynolds caught the warning just as the man pulled out a folding knife. The blade gleamed in the afternoon sunlight as he waved it threateningly. "Get off my property, or I'll cut both of you," the man roared, alcohol making him bold and stupid. Reynolds drew his weapon with practiced speed. "Drop the knife. Drop it now." The man hesitated, the knife wavering in his grip. His bloodshot eyes darted between the two officers. Calculating odds, he was too drunk to properly assess. Sarah positioned herself at an angle that gave her a clear view of both the man and the trailer entrance. Her movements were subtle, but strategic, creating multiple response options while appearing to simply follow Reynolds' lead. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Reynolds commanded. "Drop the weapon, and we can talk this through." Instead of complying, the man lunged forward with surprising speed for someone so intoxicated. Reynolds sidestepped the attack, but the man's momentum carried him towards Sarah. What happened next occurred in less than 3 seconds, though to Sarah it felt like slow motion. The man raised the knife as he stumbled in her direction. Sarah stepped inside his reach, grabbed his wrist, and applied pressure to specific nerve points. The knife clattered to the ground as the man's hand went numb. Before he could recover, Sarah had him face down on the ground with his arm twisted behind his back in a control hold that caused pain without injury. The entire sequence was so smooth and efficient that Reynolds barely had time to register what had occurred. "What the hell?" Reynolds stared in amazement as Sarah calmly held the much larger man immobilized. "Where did you learn to do that?" "Self-defense training," Sarah replied without elaborating. She maintained the hold with minimal effort while the man groaned and tried unsuccessfully to break free. "Could you check on the woman inside?" Reynolds holstered his weapon and entered the trailer, finding the woman cowering in the kitchen with blood on her face and torn clothing. She was frightened, but not seriously injured, mostly cuts from broken dishes thrown during the fight. While Reynolds called for backup and an ambulance, Sarah maintained control of the prisoner with one hand while retrieving evidence with the other. She photographed the knife's position before carefully bagging it, documenting the scene with thorough attention to detail. "How are you holding him so easily?" the man gasped, his face pressed against the dirt. "Let me go." Sarah adjusted her grip slightly, and the man immediately stopped struggling as pressure on nerve points made resistance too painful to continue. "Just relax, and this will be over soon," she said calmly. Backup arrived within minutes. Officers Carter and Wilson in separate patrol cars. They approached with weapons drawn, clearly expecting a dangerous situation. Instead, they found Sarah sitting calmly beside a subdued suspect while Reynolds took the victim's statement. "What happened here?" Carter asked, looking confused by the peaceful scene. "Suspect came at us with a knife," Reynolds explained. "Martinez took him down before he could hurt anyone." Wilson studied Sarah with new interest. "You took down Tommy Morrison? He's been in half a dozen fights with our officers over the years. Usually takes 3 or 4 of us to control him." "He was intoxicated and off balance," Sarah said modestly. "Just used his momentum against him." Carter examined the suspect, noting the complete lack of injury despite his obvious defeat. "Clean takedown. No excessive force. No bruising. Textbook control technique." As paramedics treated the victim and prepared Morrison for transport to jail, the officers discussed what they'd witnessed. Sarah had transformed from questionable rookie to competent officer in a matter of seconds. "Where exactly did you work security before this?" Wilson asked as they completed their reports. "Various places. Corporate security, personal protection, some consulting work," Sarah replied vaguely. Reynolds was unusually quiet during the drive back to town. Finally, he spoke up. "That wasn't basic security guard training." What you did back there takes serious martial arts background. Years of training. Sarah focused on completing the incident report, her handwriting neat and precise. I've always believed in being prepared for dangerous situations. That's more than being prepared. That was professional-level training. Military or law enforcement background. I prefer to let my work speak for itself, Sarah said diplomatically. The rest of their shift was relatively quiet, but Sarah noticed changes in how Reynolds treated her. Gone were the condescending comments and testing attitude. He began explaining procedures in detail and asking for her observations about various situations. During a traffic stop involving a speeding teenager, Reynolds let Sarah take the lead. She approached the vehicle with confident authority, her demeanor firm but not threatening. The young driver was initially defiant, but quickly became cooperative under Sarah's professional handling. License and registration, please, Sarah requested. Do you know why I stopped you today? I wasn't speeding, the teenager protested. Your radar must be wrong. Sarah remained calm and polite while writing the citation. The radar showed you doing 55 in a 35 zone. More importantly, there's a school zone ahead where children cross the street. Excessive speed puts innocent people at risk. The teenager's attitude shifted as Sarah's words sank in. I didn't think about that. Sorry, officer. Think about it next time, Sarah advised, handing back the documents. Drive safely. Reynolds was impressed by how Sarah had handled the stop. Good technique. You got the point across without being heavy-handed. Takes experience to read people that well. As they returned to the station, Sarah reflected on how the day had changed her colleagues' perceptions. The morning's skepticism had been replaced by curious respect, though she knew real acceptance would take time. Chief Thompson was waiting when they arrived, having heard radio reports about the domestic violence arrest. Reynolds tells me you handled yourself well today, Martinez. Want to walk me through what happened? Sarah provided a concise but thorough account of the incident, focusing on facts rather than her own actions. Thompson listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions about procedures and evidence handling. Impressive work for someone with only 2 days on the force, Thompson observed. Your report is detailed and professional. The prosecutor will have everything needed for a solid case. After Thompson returned to his office, the other officers gathered around Sarah's desk with obvious curiosity. The news of her performance had spread quickly through the small department. Morrison's been a problem for years, Carter said. He put Officer Jenkins in the hospital last year during a similar call. How did you take him down so easily? Training and timing, Sarah replied. He was impaired, which made him predictable. Bradley leaned against her desk. What kind of training? That wasn't something you learn in a weekend self-defense class. Sarah looked up from her paperwork. I've always taken personal safety seriously. Lots of practice over the years. Wilson joined the group, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. Practice is one thing, but what you did takes real skill. Professional-level skill. Everyone has different backgrounds, Sarah said diplomatically. What matters is doing the job well. The officers exchanged glances, clearly unsatisfied with her vague answers but respecting her privacy. They'd witnessed something exceptional and wanted to understand it, but Sarah's polite deflections made it clear she wouldn't elaborate. As the day's shift ended, Reynolds approached Sarah with a different attitude than he'd shown before. Good work today, Martinez. You proved you can handle yourself when things go bad. Thank you. I learned a lot watching how you managed the scene and dealt with the victim. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. Tomorrow we're doing patrol in the North District. Rougher area, more calls involving drugs and weapons. Think you're ready for that? I'll do my best, Sarah replied. After today, I think your best might be better than most people's. Just remember, every situation is different. Don't get overconfident. Sarah appreciated the advice, recognizing it as genuine concern rather than condescension. Understand, complacency is dangerous in this work. That evening, Sarah returned to her apartment with a sense of progress. She'd taken the first step toward proving herself capable, though she knew her colleagues were now more curious about her background than before. Her phone rang as she was preparing dinner. The caller ID showed a number she recognized, but hadn't expected to hear from so soon. Sarah, How are things going in your new assignment? The voice was calm and professional, belonging to someone from her previous life. Progressing as expected, Sarah replied carefully. No major issues so far. Good to hear. We're monitoring your situation as agreed. Call if you need anything. Understood. The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone. Her past was never far away, despite her efforts to build a normal life. She'd chosen Clearwater specifically because it seemed isolated from the world she'd left behind, but some connections could never be completely severed. Sarah finished preparing her meal and settled down to review the day's events. Her training officer was beginning to trust her capabilities, which would make future assignments easier. The other officers remained curious but respectful, a significant improvement from their initial hostility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in a different part of town. Sarah made mental notes about areas to research and procedures to review. Her goal remained unchanged: prove herself as a competent officer while keeping her true background hidden. She'd spent years perfecting the art of blending in, of being capable without being conspicuous. Today's incident had tested that balance, forcing her to reveal more skill than she'd planned. Now she needed to be even more careful about when and how she demonstrated her abilities. As night fell over Clearwater, Sarah reviewed local maps and crime statistics for the North District. Knowledge was power, and power carefully applied could mean the difference between success and failure. She had work to do. Sarah's third day brought her first assignment to the North District, an area Chief Thompson had described as challenging. The neighborhoods here showed clear signs of economic decline: abandoned buildings, overgrown lots, and groups of idle men who watched police cars with obvious hostility. Reynolds was notably more cooperative as they began patrol, actually explaining the area's specific problems instead of testing her knowledge. Drug activity is heavy here, mostly meth and prescription pills. The dealers know every hiding spot and escape route. Gang activity isn't organized like big cities, but there are family groups that control different territories. Their first call came within an hour: reports of gunshots near the old textile mill. Reynolds responded with lights and sirens while Sarah studied the area map, noting street layouts and potential vehicle routes. Shots fired calls are always tricky, Reynolds explained as they approached the location. Could be real violence, could be idiots target shooting, could be a setup to ambush responding officers. Stay alert and watch for anything unusual. They arrived at a cluster of rundown apartments surrounding the abandoned mill building. No gunshots could be heard now, but several residents pointed toward a wooded area behind the complex. Reynolds called for backup before they proceeded on foot. We go slow and careful, he instructed. If someone's really shooting, they might still be armed. If it's a setup, we don't want to walk into an ambush. Sarah nodded, falling into position behind and to the right of Reynolds as they approached the tree line. Her eyes constantly scanned for movement, unusual shapes, or anything that didn't belong in the natural environment. The woods were dense with underbrush and fallen logs that provided numerous hiding places. They moved carefully, using hand signals to communicate when sounds might carry to potential threats. Sarah's movements were so quiet that Reynolds occasionally glanced back to make sure she was still following. They found the shooting location easily enough: fresh brass casings scattered around a small clearing where someone had been target practicing. The targets were beer cans arranged on a fallen log, most showing bullet holes from what appeared to be a small caliber rifle. Looks like teenagers playing with Dad's .22, Reynolds observed, examining the casings. Still illegal to discharge firearms within city limits, but not exactly a major crime. Sarah studied the scene more carefully, noting details that Reynolds had missed. The shooting position showed signs of professional training. Spent casings collected in a neat pile, shooting stance marks in the dirt that indicated proper form. Target placement that suggested understanding of ballistics. These aren't random shots, she observed quietly. Whoever did this has real training. Reynolds looked more closely at the evidence Sarah had identified. You're right. The groupings on those cans are tight. This wasn't some kid fooling around. Before they could investigate further, the sound of approaching vehicles came from the direction of the apartments. Two police cars arrived with Officers Carter and Wilson, followed by a pickup truck containing three men who immediately began shouting at the officers. "This is harassment," one of the men yelled as he jumped from the truck. "You got no right to be on our property." Sarah recognized the lead man as Bobby Morrison, brother of the suspect she'd arrested the previous day. He was larger and more muscular than his sibling, with multiple tattoos and scars that suggested a violent history. His two companions looked equally dangerous. "Mr. Morrison," Reynolds said calmly, "we're investigating reports of gunfire. This is a public area, not private property." "Bullshit. My family's lived here for generations. These woods belong to us, not some city bureaucrats." Carter and Wilson positioned themselves strategically while Reynolds attempted to de-escalate the situation. Sarah remained alert but appeared relaxed, her hands free but ready to react if necessary. "You're the bitch who arrested my brother," Morrison said, focusing his attention on Sarah. "Tommy's in jail because of you." "Your brother was arrested for assault with a weapon," Sarah replied evenly. "The charges are based on his actions, not mine." Morrison stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. "Tommy said you got lucky. Said you sucker punched him when he wasn't looking. The arrest was witnessed by multiple officers and documented with photos," Sarah said without backing down. "The evidence speaks for itself." One of Morrison's companions, a thin man with prison tattoos covering his arms, moved to flank Sarah's position. "Maybe we should teach the new girl some respect for local customs." Wilson immediately drew his weapon. "That's enough. Everyone needs to step back and calm down." The situation balanced on a knife's edge. Three armed police officers faced three angry civilians in an isolated location with backup minutes away. Sarah could feel the tension building toward violence, each side waiting for the other to make the first move. "Bobby," Carter said firmly, "you know how this ends if you push it. Take your friends and leave. We'll finish our investigation and be gone." Morrison's eyes never left Sarah's face. "This ain't over, rookie. You think you're tough, but you don't know what tough really means around here." "I'm just doing my job," Sarah replied. "Nothing personal. It's personal when you mess with my family." The standoff continued for several tense seconds before Morrison gestured for his companions to retreat. "Come on, let the cops play detective. We got better things to do." They returned to their truck with obvious reluctance, engines revving as they drove away faster than necessary. Reynolds waited until they were completely gone before relaxing his alert posture. "That could have gone badly," he said, holstering his weapon. "The Morrison family has been trouble for years. Bobby's done time for assault and weapons charges." Sarah continued examining the shooting scene while the other officers discussed the confrontation. She found something interesting, a brass casing that didn't match the others. This one was larger caliber and showed signs of being from a different weapon entirely. "Reynolds, look at this," she called, using a pen to point out the casing without contaminating evidence. "This doesn't belong with the others." The senior officer examined her find carefully. "You're right. That's from a .45 caliber pistol, not a .22 rifle. Someone else was shooting here, probably more recently." Wilson joined them, studying the evidence. "Good eye, Martinez. We might have been looking at two separate incidents, target practice and something more serious." They called for a crime scene technician to properly collect and analyze the evidence. While waiting, Sarah noticed tire tracks in the soft earth near the parking area that didn't match any of the vehicles currently present. "Fresh tracks," she observed, pointing out the deep impressions. "Heavy vehicle, probably a truck. Made recently, after yesterday's rain." Carter examined the tracks with growing interest. "You're really starting to see things the rest of us miss. Where did you learn crime scene analysis?" "Attention to detail was emphasized in my previous training," Sarah replied diplomatically. The crime scene technician arrived and began photographing and collecting evidence. Sarah's observations proved correct. The different casings came from separate weapons, and the tire tracks belonged to a vehicle that had been there within the past 24 hours. Two different shooting incidents, the technician confirmed. The .22 casings are older, probably the target practice you were called about. The .45 casing is fresh, maybe from this morning. Reynolds looked thoughtful. So someone was out here shooting a handgun around the same time we got the call about target practice. Could be coincidence, or could be connected to something bigger. Their radio crackled with a new assignment. Domestic disturbance on Oak Street. Same address they'd visited the previous day. Sarah felt a sense of unease as they responded to the familiar location. Morrison's house, Reynolds said grimly. This might be payback for yesterday's arrest. They arrived to find the front door hanging open and signs of struggle inside. Tommy Morrison's wife sat on the front steps, her face showing fresh bruises and her clothes torn. She looked up fearfully as the officers approached. He came back, she whispered, said he was out on bail and wanted to settle things with the cops who arrested him. Reynolds immediately called for backup, while Sarah checked the house for any remaining threats. The interior showed signs of violent search. Furniture overturned, drawers dumped, personal belongings scattered across the floor. What was he looking for? Sarah asked gently, sitting beside the frightened woman. I don't know. He kept asking about some package, something Bobby was supposed to keep for him. When I said I didn't know anything, he got angry and started hitting me. Sarah noticed something the woman hadn't mentioned. Fresh mud on the kitchen floor that matched the tire tracks they'd found at the shooting scene. The connection was becoming clearer. Did Tommy say anything about meeting his brother today? Sarah asked. He was supposed to pick something up from Bobby this morning. Some kind of business they were doing together. The backup units arrived just as Sarah was putting together the pieces of what had happened. Tommy Morrison had been released on bail and immediately contacted his brother Bobby. They'd met at the shooting location, possibly to exchange something illegal, and then Tommy had returned home to search for additional items. Reynolds, Sarah said quietly, I think we're dealing with more than just domestic violence. The shooting scene, the confrontation with Bobby, and this break-in might all be connected. Reynolds considered her analysis. You think the Morrison brothers are involved in something bigger than family disputes? The evidence suggests coordination. The fresh tire tracks, the .45 casing, the timing of Tommy's release, and this incident, it's not coincidental. Chief Thompson arrived as they were completing the domestic violence report. He listened carefully to their summary of the day's events and Sarah's observations about potential connections. Good detective work, Martinez, Thompson said. I want you to write up a comprehensive report linking these incidents. We might need to involve county authorities if this is part of a larger criminal operation. As they returned to the station, Reynolds expressed grudging admiration for Sarah's analytical skills. Most officers would have treated each call as separate incidents. You're seeing patterns that connect the dots. Training emphasized looking at the bigger picture, Sarah replied. Individual incidents often make more sense when viewed as part of larger patterns. Back at the station, Sarah spent the rest of the shift writing detailed reports that documented each incident and identified potential connections. Her analysis was thorough and professional, presenting facts without speculation while highlighting areas that warranted further investigation. Officer Carter stopped by her desk as she was finishing the paperwork. Thompson's impressed with your work today. He's talking about recommending you for detective training after your probation period. I appreciate the confidence, Sarah said. There's still a lot to learn about local procedures and regulations. Maybe, but you're already seeing things that veterans miss. That's natural talent, not something you can teach. As the shift ended, Sarah reflected on how quickly her status had changed within the department. 3 days ago, she'd been seen as a questionable rookie who might not last the week. Now her colleagues were discussing her potential for advancement. The challenge was maintaining this positive momentum while continuing to hide the full extent of her training and experience. Each day brought new tests of her ability to appear competent without being too skilled, professional without being suspicious. Her apartment felt like a sanctuary after the day's intensity. Sarah prepared a simple meal while mentally reviewing the Morrison family situation. Their criminal activities were probably minor by the standards of her previous work, but they represented the type of persistent local problem that could escalate if not handled properly. She spent the evening researching the Morrison family's history with local law enforcement, using her laptop to access public records and court documents. The pattern that emerged was typical of generational criminal families: multiple arrests, but few convictions, charges reduced through plea bargaining, sentences that were too light to act as deterrents. Tomorrow would likely bring follow-up investigations on the Morrison case. Sarah made notes about evidence to collect and witnesses to interview. Her law enforcement training was finally being put to legitimate use, though in ways her original instructors had never intended. As she prepared for bed, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She was building a new life, one successful day at a time, proving that her skills could be used to help people instead of eliminating threats. The transition wasn't complete, but progress was being made. Sarah arrived at the station on her fourth day to find Chief Thompson waiting with a serious expression and a manila folder in his hands. The morning briefing had already begun, and all available officers were gathered in the main room. "We've got a situation developing," Thompson announced. "County intelligence reports suggest the Morrison family is involved in a drug distribution network. Yesterday's incidents weren't isolated. They're part of a larger operation that's been under surveillance for weeks." Reynolds glanced at Sarah with newfound respect. "Martinez called it yesterday. She said the incidents were connected." Thompson nodded. Her analysis was correct. "County wants our assistance with a coordinated operation. Martinez, your observations have been forwarded to the task force. They're impressed with your detective work." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern. Recognition was good for her cover, but too much attention from county law enforcement might lead to deeper background checks that could expose her true history. "What's our role in the operation?" Officer Carter asked. "We know the local players and terrain," Thompson replied. "County provides manpower and specialized equipment. The plan is to execute simultaneous raids on 3 locations: Bobby Morrison's house, the textile mill area, and a storage facility on Route 9. Wilson studied the tactical maps Thompson distributed. "When do we move?" "Tonight. 300 hours. Full tactical gear and coordinated timing." Thompson's expression was grave. "Intelligence suggests the Morrisons are expecting trouble. They've been moving weapons and products since Tommy's release yesterday." The briefing continued with detailed assignments and communication protocols. Sarah found herself assigned to the Route 9 team, working with county officers she'd never met. Her role was primarily observational, provide local knowledge while experienced tactical officers handled the dangerous work. During the afternoon, Sarah and Reynolds conducted surveillance on Bobby Morrison's residence. They parked in an unmarked vehicle with a clear view of the house, while maintaining radio contact with other units monitoring different locations. "Activity's been steady all day," Reynolds observed, photographing vehicles that came and went from the Morrison property. "Different people, short visits, classic drug distribution pattern." Sarah studied the house through binoculars, noting details that might be important during the raid. 2-story structure, multiple exits, large backyard with wooded area for potential escape routes. Security cameras on the front porch and driveway. "You're getting good at this surveillance stuff," Reynolds commented. "Most rookies get bored sitting in a car for hours." "I find it interesting to watch patterns develop," Sarah replied truthfully. "People reveal a lot through their behavior and routines." Their radio crackled with updates from other surveillance teams. The textile mill site showed increased activity, with several vehicles arriving and departing regularly. The Route 9 storage facility appeared quiet, but thermal imaging suggested multiple people inside the building. As evening approached, the tension among all team members increased. This would be Clearwater PD's largest operation in years, involving coordination with county SWAT teams and federal drug enforcement agents. Success could boost the department's reputation, while failure might result in injuries or escaped suspects. Chief Thompson arrived at their surveillance position as darkness fell. "How's it looking?" "Consistent activity all day," Sarah reported. "At least 8 different vehicles, mostly short visits of 10 to 15 minutes. 2 longer visits that lasted over an hour each." Good intelligence. County's ready to move at 0300. Everyone needs to be in position by 0230. Thompson handed them updated tactical plans. Remember, this isn't a TV show. Stay behind cover, follow orders exactly, and don't take unnecessary risks. The hours before the raid passed slowly. Sarah used the time to memorize building layouts, escape routes, and team member positions. Her training had taught her that preparation could mean the difference between success and disaster, life and death. At 0230, they moved to their assigned positions around the Route 9 storage facility. Sarah found herself partnered with Detective Lisa Hayes from the county, an experienced officer with 15 years in law enforcement. First major raid? Hayes asked as they checked their equipment one final time. Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied. Stay close, follow my lead, and keep your head down. These things can go sideways fast if someone gets spooked. The storage facility was an old warehouse converted into rental units for boats, RVs, and other large items. Intelligence suggested the Morrisons were using Unit 47 to store drugs and weapons before distribution. The building had multiple entrances, but limited escape routes. Sarah's earpiece crackled with countdown updates from the operation commander. All teams report ready status. Team Alpha ready. Team Bravo ready. Team Charlie ready. The simultaneous raids would begin in 60 seconds. Sarah could feel her heart rate increase slightly, but her training kept her focused and calm. This was familiar territory, though the objectives were different from her previous work. Execute, execute, execute. The warehouse erupted in controlled chaos as officers moved to their assigned positions. Flashbang grenades illuminated the darkness as entry teams breached multiple doors simultaneously. Sarah followed Detective Hayes toward their designated backup position, weapon ready but not expecting to use it. The sounds of the raid echoed through the metal building, shouted commands, running footsteps, and the distinctive noise of doors being forced open. Radio chatter provided updates as teams secured different areas of the facility. Unit 47 is locked down. Multiple suspects in custody. Team Bravo has weapons and drug evidence. Storage unit contains large quantities of methamphetamine and cash. Sarah maintained her position while observing the professional efficiency of the operation. County officers moved with practice coordination, each person knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. The Clearwater officers integrated seamlessly despite their relative inexperience with large-scale raids. Martinez, Hayes, we need you at Unit 47, came the radio command. Bring evidence collection gear. They approached the storage unit to find 3 suspects face down on the concrete, while officers secured the scene. Sarah recognized 2 of the men as Morrison associates who'd been at the confrontation in the woods. The third was a stranger, middle-aged with expensive clothing that suggested he wasn't local. Detective Hayes began photographing the scene, while Sarah assisted with evidence cataloging. The storage unit contained an impressive array of illegal materials. Plastic bags filled with crystal methamphetamine, several handguns, boxes of ammunition, and stacks of cash secured with rubber bands. Professional operation, Hayes observed as she documented the evidence. This isn't small-time dealing. Someone with serious connections set this up. Sarah noticed something others had missed, a cell phone hidden behind boxes near the back of the unit. She pointed it out to Hayes, who carefully bagged it as potential evidence. Good eye. That phone might contain contact information for their suppliers or customers. The raid continued for another hour as officers methodically searched every storage unit and questioned all suspects. The operation was a complete success, substantial drug seizure, multiple arrests, and enough evidence to support serious criminal charges. Chief Thompson arrived as the scene was being secured. Outstanding work, everyone. This operation will significantly impact drug distribution in our county. Detective Hayes approached him with initial findings. Martinez has been exceptional. Sharp observations, professional conduct, excellent evidence handling. You got a natural detective here. Sarah appreciated the praise, but remained focused on completing her assigned tasks. Recognition was good, but she needed to be careful not to appear too skilled or knowledgeable for someone with her supposed background. As dawn broke, the teams began returning to their respective stations. The Clearwater officers were exhausted but satisfied with their performance. They'd proven they could work effectively with county and federal agencies on complex operations. Back at the station, Chief Thompson called a debriefing meeting to review the night's events. Each officer provided their perspective on what worked well and what could be improved for future operations. Martinez, Thompson said when it was her turn to speak, "Your surveillance work and evidence observations were crucial to our success. Detective Hayes specifically requested that you be considered for the county task force." Sarah felt conflicted about the offer. Task force work would provide opportunities for career advancement, but it would also mean increased scrutiny of her background and qualifications. "I appreciate the confidence, Chief. I'd like to complete my probationary period here first." "Fair enough. The opportunity will still be available when you're ready." The rest of the morning was spent completing paperwork and processing evidence from the raid. Sarah's reports were detailed and precise, documenting everything she'd observed and all actions she'd taken during the operation. Reynolds found her at her desk, finishing the last report. "Hell of a night, Martinez. You handled yourself like a veteran out there." "Good teamwork made it successful," Sarah replied. "Everyone knew their job and did it well." "That's true, but some people have natural instinct for police work. You got those instincts." As the shift ended, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in just 4 days. She'd gone from suspected incompetent to respected team member to potential task force candidate. The progression was faster than she'd planned, but she was adapting to new circumstances. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Impressive work last night. Your new colleagues don't know how lucky they are." Sarah deleted the message immediately. Someone from her previous life was monitoring her activities, which wasn't entirely unexpected, but was concerning. She'd have to be even more careful about balancing competence with discretion. That afternoon, Sarah visited the county courthouse to testify about the Morrison domestic violence case from earlier in the week. The courtroom was nearly empty except for court personnel, the prosecutor, and Tommy Morrison with his public defender. Her testimony was straightforward and professional. She described the scene, the evidence collected, and the arrest procedures followed. The prosecutor was thorough, but didn't ask about her background or training beyond what was relevant to the case. Tommy Morrison's attorney attempted to discredit her testimony by questioning her experience and qualifications. "Officer Martinez, how many domestic violence arrests have you made in your career?" "This was my first as a sworn police officer," Sarah answered honestly. "And how much training do you have in recognizing signs of domestic abuse?" "I completed the state-required training program, plus additional coursework in crisis intervention and de-escalation techniques." The attorney continued probing, clearly hoping to find weaknesses in her preparation or procedures. Sarah answered each question calmly and accurately, never volunteering information beyond what was asked. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interjected, "Officer Martinez followed proper procedures and documented everything appropriately. The defense's questions about her experience are irrelevant to the facts of this case." The judge agreed, and Tommy Morrison was ordered to continue his treatment program and stay away from his wife. As Sarah left the courthouse, she noticed Bobby Morrison sitting in the hallway with several of his associates. Their expressions made it clear they blamed her for their current legal troubles. "This ain't over," Bobby called out as she passed. "You cost us a lot of money, rookie." Sarah didn't respond, but made a mental note to be extra cautious in the coming days. The Morrison family had resources and connections that could make life difficult for anyone they considered an enemy. Returning to the station, Sarah found Detective Hayes waiting in the lobby. "Officer Martinez? I was hoping to catch you. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" They sat in the break room, where Hayes explained the county task force opportunity in more detail. "We need someone with your observational skills and investigative instincts. The position would involve working major cases throughout the county, coordinating with federal agencies, and potential advancement to detective rank. It sounds like an excellent opportunity, Sarah said carefully. What would be the timeline for such a position? Normally, we'd want someone with more experience, but your performance has been exceptional. If you're interested, we could fast-track the application process. Sarah expressed appreciation for the offer while explaining her preference to complete her probationary period in Clearwater first. Hayes accepted her decision, but left contact information in case she changed her mind. As evening approached, Sarah prepared to end another eventful day. She'd successfully participated in a major law enforcement operation, testified in court, and received offers for career advancement. Each achievement brought her closer to establishing a permanent new identity while taking her further from her previous life. The challenge remained balancing competence with discretion, being good enough to succeed without being so exceptional that people asked uncomfortable questions about her background. So far, she was managing that balance, but future tests would likely be more challenging. 2 weeks had passed since the successful drug raid, and Sarah had settled into a routine that felt almost normal. Her colleagues had fully accepted her as a competent officer, and even Chief Thompson had stopped treating her like a questionable rookie. The Morrison case had gone to trial with convictions on multiple charges, effectively disrupting their local drug network. Sarah was completing paperwork when her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Multiple officers down, shots fired at the First National Bank downtown. All available units respond immediately. The station erupted into controlled chaos as every officer grabbed equipment and rushed toward their vehicles. Sarah found herself partnered with Officer Carter, racing through downtown streets with sirens wailing and emergency lights cutting through the afternoon traffic. "What do we know?" Sarah asked as Carter navigated around slower vehicles. 2 masked suspects entered the bank with automatic weapons. Multiple hostages inside, at least 3 officers down when they tried to respond. Carter's voice was tense. "This is the biggest crisis Clearwater's ever faced." They arrived at a scene of controlled pandemonium. Police cars formed a perimeter around the bank building, while paramedics treated wounded officers behind armored vehicles. Chief Thompson was coordinating with county SWAT teams and federal agents who had responded to the crisis. Sarah could see the bank through her binoculars, a modern building with large windows that provided clear sightlines both in and out. 2 figures in military-style gear moved past the windows, clearly armed with assault rifles. Several civilians were visible on the floor, apparently being held as hostages. "County SWAT is 30 minutes out," Thompson announced to the assembled officers. "FBI hostage negotiators are en route from the regional office. Our job is to contain the situation and gather intelligence until specialized units arrive." Detective Hayes from the county approached Sarah and Carter. "Martinez, I need your observational skills. Can you set up surveillance and document everything you see? Positions, weapons, hostage count, anything that might help tactical teams." Sarah accepted the binoculars and notepad, positioning herself behind an armored vehicle with clear sight lines to the bank. Her training immediately kicked in as she began analyzing the situation with professional detachment. 2 suspects visible, both armed with what appeared to be AR-15 style rifles. Military-style clothing and equipment suggest professional training. Movement patterns indicate familiarity with tactical procedures, she reported into her radio. "How many hostages?" Hayes asked. Sarah adjusted the binoculars, counting carefully. "I can see 7 civilians on the floor in the main lobby area, possibly more in other parts of the building. The suspects are keeping them grouped together for easier control." Chief Thompson joined them behind the vehicle. The bank security system was disabled before the robbery began. These aren't amateur criminals. They knew exactly what they were doing. As Sarah continued her surveillance, she noticed something that troubled her. One of the suspects moved with a distinctive gait she'd seen before, in a very different context. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She knew who was inside that bank. Marcus Webb, former Navy SEAL, dishonorably discharged for conduct violations. She'd worked with him briefly on a classified operation before his career ended in disgrace. If Webb was involved, this situation was far more dangerous than anyone realized. Martinez, what's your assessment? Hayes asked, noticing her sudden change in demeanor. Sarah had to make a split-second decision about how much to reveal. The suspects show signs of military training, professional movement, proper weapon handling, tactical awareness. This isn't a desperate robbery. It's a planned operation. Her radio crackled with updates from other positions. Suspect at north window, surveying police positions. He's documenting our deployment. Sarah watched through her binoculars as Webb systematically observed the police response, making notes about vehicle positions and personnel deployment. He was planning something beyond a simple robbery, possibly an escape route that would involve engaging law enforcement. "Chief," Sarah said urgently, "we need to reposition some of our vehicles. The suspects are mapping our positions for tactical purposes." Thompson looked at her with surprise. "How can you tell?" "The way they're moving, what they're focusing on. They're not acting like bank robbers. They're acting like soldiers planning a mission." Before Thompson could respond, gunfire erupted from a bank. High-velocity rounds shattered police car windows and sent officers scrambling for better cover. The shooting was precise and controlled, designed to pin down law enforcement rather than inflict maximum casualties. "They're buying time," Sarah observed as the gunfire stopped. "Professional covering fire to delay our response." Hayes was coordinating with arriving federal agents when her radio crackled with new information. "We've identified one of the suspects. Marcus Webb, former military, wanted by federal authorities on weapons trafficking charges." Sarah's blood ran cold. If Webb was here, it wasn't coincidental. He was either after something specific in the bank, or this was part of a larger operation designed to draw on law enforcement. Either way, the situation was about to get much worse. "Detective Hayes," Sarah said carefully, "if one suspect is former military, we should assume both have specialized training. Standard hostage procedures might not work against targets with tactical knowledge." Hayes studied Sarah's expression. "You seem to know something about military tactics. What would you recommend?" This was the moment Sarah had hoped to avoid, being forced to reveal expertise that went far beyond basic police training. But innocent lives were at stake, and her colleagues needed information only she could provide. Military-trained suspects will have contingency plans for every possible response. They'll have studied SWAT tactics, negotiation procedures, and federal protocols. Whatever approach we take needs to be unexpected. Chief Thompson joined their discussion. SWAT estimates 45 minutes before they can deploy. FBI negotiators are 60 minutes out. We need to keep this contained until specialized units arrive. Sarah watched Webb through her binoculars as he positioned himself near a hostage cluster. His tactical awareness was evident in every movement. He knew exactly where police snipers would position themselves and had arranged hostages to block potential shots. "He's using the hostages as human shields in a very specific way," Sarah reported. "Professional understanding of police sniper protocols." The radio suddenly crackled with a new voice. One of the suspects was using the bank's phone system to communicate with police. "This is Webb. I want to speak with whoever's in charge out there." Chief Thompson moved to the command vehicle to take the call while Sarah continued her surveillance. Through her binoculars, she could see Webb talking on the phone while his partner maintained watch over the hostages. "What are your demands?" Thompson's voice carried through radio speakers. "No demands. This is a business transaction. We'll be leaving in exactly 30 minutes with what we came for. Don't interfere, and nobody gets hurt. What did you come for? Maybe we can work something out." Webb's laugh was cold and professional. "You can't give me what I need, Chief. But in 30 minutes, this will be over one way or another." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Webb wasn't bluffing. He had a specific timeline for a reason. Either extraction was coming, or he was planning to fight his way out regardless of casualties. "Detective Hayes," Sarah said urgently, "we need to evacuate the surrounding buildings. If they're planning to shoot their way out, civilians in adjacent structures are at risk." Hayes looked at her sharply. "How do you know what they're planning?" Sarah made another critical decision about how much to reveal. The timeline threat, the professional tactics, the way they're positioned. This isn't ending with negotiation. They're preparing for combat. As if to confirm her assessment, both suspects suddenly moved to new positions that provided better fields of fire toward police vehicles. They were repositioning for a fighting withdrawal, not preparing to surrender or negotiate. Chief Thompson returned from the command vehicle. FBI says to maintain containment and wait for specialized units. Webb's background suggests he's capable of significant violence. Chief, with respect, waiting might not be an option, Sarah said. If they're planning to fight their way out, every minute gives them more time to prepare. Thompson studied her carefully. Martinez, you're talking like you have tactical experience beyond basic police training. What aren't you telling us? Before Sarah could respond, explosions rocked the bank building. Webb had detonated charges that blew out sections of the north and east walls, creating multiple exit routes while filling the air with dust and debris. In the chaos that followed, both suspects emerged from different holes in the building, using smoke and confusion to mask their movements. They moved with military precision, covering each other while advancing toward predetermined positions. Sarah watched Webb's tactical deployment and realized with horror what he was attempting. The explosions weren't for escape. They were designed to funnel police response into a kill zone, where he could engage multiple targets simultaneously. Everyone take cover, Sarah shouted into her radio. This is a tactical ambush. Her warning came just in time as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. Webb and his partner had set up interlocking fields of fire that turned the street into a battlefield. Police vehicles were riddled with bullets as officers scrambled for cover. Sarah found herself pinned behind an overturned patrol car with Detective Hayes and 2 county officers. Bullets sparked off metal and shattered windows around them as Webb demonstrated the difference between criminal desperation and military tactics. "We need to move," Hayes gasped, reloading her service weapon. "He's got us pinned down in the open." Sarah studied the tactical situation, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and available cover. Her training was screaming at her to act, to use skills that could end this threat in minutes rather than hours. "Martinez, you've been right about everything so far," Hayes said urgently. "What do we do now?" The moment of truth had arrived. Sarah could continue hiding behind her cover story while good people died, or she could reveal her true capabilities to save innocent lives. The choice was actually simple. "Give me cover fire on my mark," Sarah said, checking her equipment. "I'm going to flank his position." "You're what?" "Martinez, you're not trained for this." Sarah looked at Hayes with eyes that suddenly showed depths of experience no rookie officer should possess. "Detective, trust me on this. I know what I'm doing." Before Hayes could object, Sarah sprinted from cover toward a series of concrete barriers that would provide concealment for a flanking maneuver. Her movements were fluid and professional, showing tactical awareness that came from years of specialized training. Webb spotted her movement and shifted fire in her direction, but Sarah was already behind cover, working her way around his position with techniques that would have impressed his old SEAL instructors. "Who the hell is that officer?" came a voice over the radio. Sarah reached a position where she could see Webb clearly without being observed herself. He was exactly where she'd expected him to be, focused on the police vehicles while unaware of the threat developing on his flank. Using hand signals, she coordinated with Hayes to provide distraction while she moved to final position. Years of training and experience condensed into a few seconds of perfect execution. Webb never saw her coming. One moment, he was laying down suppressive fire on police positions. The next moment, he was face down with his weapon secured, and his partner surrender rather than face the same fate. The entire engagement lasted less than 2 minutes from Sarah's first movement to final suspect surrender. The tactical precision was so professional that even experienced officers stared in amazement at what they'd witnessed. Chief Thompson approached as Sarah secured the crime scene, his expression showing complete bewilderment. "Martinez, where in hell did you learn to do that?" Sarah looked up from the handcuffed suspects, knowing her carefully constructed cover story had just been completely destroyed. "It's complicated, Chief." Detective Hayes joined them, studying Sarah with new eyes. That wasn't police academy training. That was military special operations level tactics. The secret was out. Sarah's true background could no longer be hidden behind vague references to security work and self-defense training. Her colleagues deserved explanations, and the situation demanded truth. "My name is Sarah Martinez," she said simply. "Former Navy SEAL, 10 years active duty, specialized in direct action and counterterrorism operations. I came to Clearwater looking for a normal life." The silence that followed was deafening. Every officer present stared at her with expressions ranging from amazement to disbelief to sudden understanding of everything they'd witnessed over the past 2 weeks. Chief Thompson was the first to speak. "Navy SEAL. That explains everything. The tactical awareness, the detective instincts, the way you handled dangerous situations." Reynolds shook his head in wonder. "I knew there was something different about you, but I never imagined a real Navy SEAL working patrol in Clearwater." As federal agents arrived to take custody of the suspects and process the crime scene, Sarah found herself the center of attention from colleagues who suddenly understood they'd been working alongside someone with extraordinary capabilities. "Why Clearwater?" Hayes asked. "Someone with your background could work anywhere." Sarah looked around at the officers who had become her friends and colleagues. "Because I wanted to use my skills to help people instead of eliminate threats. I wanted to prove that I could be more than what I was trained to be." Chief Thompson extended his hand. "Well, Officer Martinez, or should I say, Petty Officer Martinez, Clearwater is damn lucky to have you. You save a lot of lives today." The handshake felt like acceptance and understanding. Sarah's secret was revealed, but instead of rejection, she found respect and appreciation from people who now understood the true value of what she brought to their team. As the immediate crisis ended and normal operations resumed, Sarah realized that her quest for a normal life had taken an unexpected turn. She was still a police officer in a small town, but now her colleagues knew who she really was and what she was truly capable of achieving. The Morrison family's petty criminal activities seemed almost quaint compared to the threats she'd faced in her previous career. But helping elderly residents and mediating neighbor disputes felt just as meaningful as any military mission she'd completed. That evening, as Sarah completed her incident reports and prepared to face whatever questions would come from her revealed background, she reflected on the strange path that had brought her to this moment. She'd come to Clearwater hoping to disappear into anonymity. Instead, she found herself in a place where her unique skills were valued and her desire to help people was appreciated. It wasn't the normal life she'd originally planned, but it was perhaps something better, a purposeful life where she could use her abilities to protect and serve people who deserved both. The new girl they'd told to get lost had instead found her place in a community that needed her unique talents. And for the first time since leaving the military, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged.